Okay, so if I told you that one country, almost overnight, just completely dominated the global market for real-time payments. I mean, outpacing the United States, the entire EU, even China, in how fast people started using it. Which country would you guess? You'd probably think, a tech giant in Asia or maybe somewhere in Europe.
And you'd be wrong. The answer, and this is what continues to just fascinate economists and fintech people, is Brazil. The system is called Pix. And its success is, well, it's rewriting the book on how you build modern infrastructure.
Right. And Pix is so much more than just another app. It's a whole payment layer for the entire country, like a public utility that the central bank built. And it basically turned the country's financial system on its head, like immediately. We're talking about success that was just staggering. In its first 2 years, Pix processed more digital payments than the entire Brazilian card industry.
The entire thing. Debit, credit, everything combined.
Everything.
And that kind of adoption, that speed, it doesn't happen by accident. So our mission in this deep dive is to really figure out, what were the strategic decisions? What was the political will that made this happen? We're looking at how Brazil became the global benchmark and why places from Singapore to the U.S. Federal Reserve are now studying the Pix blueprint. It's a really compelling story.
Okay, so let's set the stage here. For a solution like this to be so successful, the problems must have been really, really bad. What was it actually like in Brazil, say 5 years ago? What was this perfect storm that made everyone so ready for a change?
Well, the pre-Pix era was defined by basically a triple threat. 3 huge problems holding everything back. First, just the cost of moving your own money. Brazil's banking scene was, and still is, very concentrated. A few big players. And that lack of competition meant incredibly high fees for businesses to accept card payments.
So merchants were getting hit hard just for going digital?
Absolutely. But for the average person, it was even more direct. Basic bank transfers from one bank to another, they cost money.
Yeah.
If you wanted your money to get there on the same day, you paid a premium for it.
Wow. So just moving money from my account at Bank A to my savings at Bank B would cost me?
It could, yeah. It was a system with financial friction just baked right into it. And people hated it.
Okay, so that's problem 1. It's expensive.
Which leads right into problem 2.
Yeah.
It was painfully slow. Even those transfers you paid for took hours, sometimes until the next day. And if you sent money after, say, 4 p.m. on a Friday...
Forget it. You're waiting till Monday.
Exactly. The whole pace of commerce was being dictated by this, 20th century banking schedule. It was a total nightmare for an economy with the kind of energy Brazil has.
It's paralyzing.
It was. And that brings us to the third piece, which is maybe the most important. Massive financial exclusion. Millions and millions of Brazilians were completely unbanked, or they had an account but couldn't really use it. World Bank data showed Brazil had one of the biggest informal cash economies in Latin America. The old system was just too complex and expensive for a huge part of the population.
So slow, expensive, and a huge chunk of the country is completely locked out. That really is a perfect storm. But this is where the story pivots so dramatically, because Brazil's central bank did something completely different from what you see in other countries. They didn't just wait for some startup to come along and fix it.
This is the absolute key. Most countries, they try to use regulation to encourage innovation from private companies. Think about Europe with PSD2, or the U.S. with private networks like Zelle, and now FedNow, which is voluntary. Brazil's central bank just said, no, we're not going to regulate innovation. We are going to build the innovation.
And they launched Pix as a public utility built by the government and then forced every bank to use it.
That sounds, how did they get that past the big banks who were making a fortune off the old system?
Well, that's where the power of a central bank comes in. They used their regulatory authority. It was a mandate. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a rule. Any bank with over 500,000 customers had to integrate Pix. Full stop. They framed it not as a competitor, but as essential public infrastructure, like roads or the power grid.
So they just skipped right over the years of arguments and pilot programs and all the fragmentation you see in the U.S. or the U.K.
Yeah.
They basically achieved universal access on day one. By force.
Exactly. And that regulation plus execution model is why everyone's studying them now. Central banks in Africa, for example, they see it as a kind of state-driven M-Pesa, a tool for immediate top-down change.
So let's talk about the launch itself. November 16, 2020. The numbers that followed they're why we're doing this deep dive.
They're genuinely hard to believe. Over 100 million Brazilians signed up for Pix in the first year.
100 million. In 1 year. That's almost half the country. The transaction volume just exploded. It blew past credit and debit cards combined faster than any payment system ever has. Today, Something like 70% of the entire population uses it all the time.
And it wasn't just for people who were already comfortable with digital banking, it was everywhere. Okay, I want to really dig into the why now. Lots of countries have tried instant payments. Why was Pix just unstoppable? Let's get into those 5 big decisions that really locked in its success.
Right, this is where you can see the strategy, and it's where other countries tend to get it wrong. They introduce friction. The first decision, like we said, was that mandatory bank integration. This is so critical. Look at the U.S. Fragmentation kills innovation there. I have Zelle, you have Venmo, my bank uses FedNow, yours doesn't. The whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
Brazil's central bank just said that's not happening here. They made it compulsory.
Which is a huge political move. Okay, so everyone's on board. Then they dealt with the cost.
And that's decision 2, zero-fee transfers for consumers. Just a masterstroke, making it completely free for people, instantly removed all resistance. In places like South Africa or Mexico, there's still some small fees or complexities. Brazil just got rid of them.
I mean, if it's free, it's instant, and it's everywhere, why wouldn't you use it? Which brings us to the user experience. How simple was it?
And that's decision number 3. The extremely simple UX with Pix keys. Before Pix, you had to type in like long bank account numbers, branch codes. It was clunky, easy to mess up. Pix replaced all of that with simple things you already know. Your phone number, your email, your national ID, or just a random key.
So I don't have to ask you for all your bank details. I just say, what's your phone number?
That's it. The whole transfer takes seconds. And because you're not sharing sensitive bank info, it builds a lot of trust right from the start. People who study user interface design say it's even cleaner than India's UPI, which was kind of the pioneer here.
Okay, let's talk about the cultural side, how it's spread across every part of society. That was decision 4, wasn't it?
Yeah, universality across formal and informal economies. This is the real heart of it. Pix wasn't just for tech-savvy people in big cities. We saw stories of street musicians holding up QR codes scribbled on cardboard, food stalls with a laminated Pix code taped to the counter, informal workers getting paid instantly.
That cardboard sign anecdote, that really brings it home. That's real grassroots financial inclusion.
It's the ultimate test, right? Can it work for everyone, everywhere? Pix did. And then finally, you have to get the merchants on board.
The ones who were paying all those fees before.
Exactly. Decision 5 was merchant affordability. For small businesses, Pix offered dramatically lower costs than cards. We're not talking about a small discount. This is about survival. When your margins are razor thin, going from a 3% card fee to almost nothing is a game changer. So merchants started actively pushing their customers to use Pix.
It's a perfect feedback loop. It's free and easy for customers, so they use it. It's cheap for merchants, so they push for it. And the whole thing runs on rails the government made mandatory. All right, let's shift from this amazing local success to its global performance. Because the data shows this isn't just a Brazilian story, it's a world-leading one.
The numbers are just dominant. The ACI Worldwide Report from 2023 showed Pix processed over 24 billion transactions in a single year. Let me put that in context for you. That is more real-time payments than the entire United States industry. Zelle, FedNow, all of it. It's more than all of Europe's instant payment networks combined. Brazil is just operating at another level.
That volume is just, it's insane. How does it compare to its closest rival, India's UPI?
They're the two giants for sure, but there's a key difference. UPI in India has started to bring in small merchant fees for some transactions. Pix has stuck to its model. Free for people, super low cost for businesses. The friction is basically zero. So while the U.S. is still struggling to get everyone on board, Pix has become, just a part of daily culture in Brazil.
And let's talk about that impact on financial inclusion. What did Pix do for all those millions of unbanked people and for the local tech scene?
It was completely transformational. Pix gave the neobanks, the digital banks like Nubank, C6, the tool they needed. They saw this explosive growth because they could suddenly sign up and serve millions of unbanked people instantly and for almost no cost. Before Pix, that was a logistical nightmare. Suddenly it was easy.
I love that analogy we found in the source material. Pix became the rails, fintechs became the trains, the economy became the destination.
It captures it perfectly. The central bank didn't compete with the fintechs, it enabled them. Nubank has said that Pix was a critical reason they could scale to over 90 million customers so quickly. It didn't just fix a payment problem, it lit a fire under the whole digital finance ecosystem.
And because of that success, Pix is now the blueprint. Other countries aren't just curious, they're actively trying to copy it.
Oh, absolutely. Delegations are flying to Brazil from everywhere. Singapore wants to know how they got merchants to adopt it so fast. The UK is looking at the mandatory integration model. Even the US Federal Reserve studied PICs very closely when they were building FedNow. The big question they all have is, how do you get the political will to make it universal?
The lesson seems to be if you want everyone on board, you can't just ask nicely. And they're not done. They're already planning what comes next for this infrastructure.
Yeah, they see PICs as an operating system for the economy now. The central bank has already announced a whole roadmap. Things like PIX Garantido, which is like a buy now, pay later system built right in. There's PIX Automatico for recurring bills, plans for international transfers, and even an offline version using Bluetooth for areas with bad internet.
So it's not a payment method anymore. It's becoming a foundational utility like the internet or electricity.
Precisely. The success comes from that unique mix. A bold government that was willing to execute, a mandate that killed fragmentation, a simple design that people loved, and a price that merchants couldn't ignore. Brazil just built the future instead of waiting for it.
So what's the big takeaway here for you, the listener, as you're looking at finance and technology around the world? We've seen this government-built system, free for users, just completely dominate, not just at home, but on a global scale.
And that raises a really important question, especially for those of you living in places with really fragmented payment systems. Given how unbelievably successful PIX has been, should more high-income countries stop trying to just gently regulate the private sector and instead have their central bank step in and execute? Should they be the ones to build this core public infrastructure and make it mandatory? The story of PIX suggests that sometimes if you want speed and access for everyone, the state needs to act decisively, not just wait for the market.